Hello there, and welcome to Gooner U, where there are no degrees because the learning never stops. I'm Dove, a TA here at Gooner U, and my friend Keith is our stalwart distinguished professor of Arsenal and football studies. Enter our classroom as we discuss the week's news involving Arsenal, Premier League, Champions League, and international football, all from the perspective of a couple of Americans. This week, Arsenal hosted 2 games at the Emirates, or Arsenal Stadium, as we were contractually obligated to call it for the Champions League match, against PSG earlier this week, and then Bournemouth yesterday, as we record this. Hello, Keith.
Hello, Dove, and I want to start this on a happy note. I would just like to say, in honor of the calendar, May the 4th be with you.
Aha! Yeah, it's maybe the first time that we're recording on Star Wars Day. So, as the customary response is, and with you.
And also with you. Yeah, that's a pleasant thing to think about. We'll have to see. Yep. We didn't discuss this pre-show, but we'll see how many Star Wars references we can sprinkle in there beyond the ones we usually do. I mean,
the gauntlet has been thrown down. We'll see what we can do.
Yeah, it's not quite meow, but we'll.
Reference acknowledged. We celebrated today by watching Thunderbolts. So
okay. That's
adjacent. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
It's all under the mouse house. You know. It's
Okay. I've been working my way through Andor. So. Okay.
Yeah. I'm a couple episodes in now. Yeah, it's been decent. We're avoiding talking about Arsenal so far.
But we won't for long. We won't for long. This gotta face the darkness, as it were.
Yeah. Well, before I watched the Bournemouth match yesterday, I had a fun experience for the first time seeing our local soccer team. We've talked about it a couple times before, as I've kind of asked you, where are they in the pyramid? Like, how do I gauge this? What are they? But it's the Kingston Stockade. And we discussed this. They're like 6 or 7 levels down. They're pretty low down in the pyramid, but they are, maybe a 20-minute drive. Their home stadium, where I watched them yesterday with my son. This is actually their first time back in their stadium, which has been totally renovated. They were playing, I guess, at Marist College for the past few years, which is in Poughkeepsie, across the river and down a ways. But they do call themselves Hudson Valley's team. They're not a Kingston-specific team, although that is their home. But it was fun. It was, it's sitting on bleachers, no assigned seats, just a very nice atmosphere. There's like orange, as you can see, I'm wearing the jersey today. Their color is orange. There's orange smoke at the beginning of the match, and after each of the goals, an orange. I don't know what you'd call it. I don't know. It's kind of a flare, kind of a smoke bomb, but not used as a projectile. But
flare, right? You just light it up and kind of, very, very European. Which is not a surprise.
And drums, a pretty persistent drum beat throughout most of it. There's like a little drum corps that processed along us before the match, and they kind of settled right in the middle of like the home and visiting sections. That's something that I haven't really noticed in English football. I noticed in like Miami matches. I think I hear that sometimes. So I don't know if that's like a South American thing that moved its way up to us or what it might be. But
no, you'll see that. You'll see the drums and stuff all over.
Okay.
That's not an unusual thing.
Yeah, but it was fun. We had a good time. We are now season ticket holders for the season. So for me and him, and then whoever wants to join us, we'll get a ticket for that day for him. It's incredibly reasonable. We were talking about jersey prices a couple of weeks back, and the jersey prices were incredibly reasonable compared to Premier League jersey prices. So, and
I just looked this up. Apparently, they're in something called the League for Clubs, which is just.
I saw that.
It's just so fantastic. Yeah, that appears to be the.
Yes, I'm trying to show it on the camera. The League for Clubs.
The League for Clubs.
Yep.
Which is some kind of fantastic, I have to say, as a name. It's extraordinarily meta, but.
Yeah. Like, what else would it be a league for?
Uh-huh.
So beyond that, it was kind of funny, a little more Arsenal focused, on a podcast that I listen to pretty regularly called The Jordan Harbinger Show. They do episodes every now and then. They have different like kind of sub series that they run. And one of them is called Out of the Loop, where it talks about like, it seems like only international topics. And for people who don't follow, like, for instance, the last one that they did before this one was about the Ukrainian conflict. And they've done a couple of those over the last couple of years, just kind of for people who aren't following it closely, the history going into it and what the state of things is now. Well, they did one just this past week on Rwanda, which I listened to. And as someone who frequently wears shirts that say visit Rwanda on the sleeve, it was interesting to note what you might expect if you are visiting there and what it's like there. And then the neighboring Democratic Republic of Congo and things like that. It's not necessarily someplace I would choose to visit, but it wasn't really on the table before listening to that either. So.
Yeah, it's an interesting. We should point out just we're coming at this as Americans, as we always talk about, and for us, like going to Africa feels like, man, that's a long way away. But if you're European, I mean, going to Africa is very much the same as like, I'd like to go to Rio. You know, like it geographically, it's obviously much more. If it's going to feel more accessible, you're basically in the same time zone, so there's a certain accessibility there. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that the Visit Rwanda advertisement, which, you know, if you wish to see, there it is, has come under a little bit of scrutiny recently. So Rwanda, as you talk about not being a place you'd particularly like to visit, yeah, I think that's fair. It is, and Arsenal's come under a bit of criticism from portions of their fan base for taking Rwanda's money, essentially. So the president of Rwanda, Kagame, I think his name is apparently a big Arsenal fan. Definitely falls under the category of was at one time democratically elected.
Okay.
At one point was.
Overstayed his welcome a bit, perhaps?
Well, I mean, he doesn't think so, clearly. I mean, that's why they have a deal with Arsenal, is that he's a fan and he wanted to be involved. And I mean, you know, there is a bit of tourism there. There are some other aspects of the relationship between the UK and Rwanda that this isn't the podcast to get into those on, so I'm not going to. Yes. But you know,
it was covered on that show that'll be linked in the description. Yes,
I'm sure. And so within the Arsenal world, there was to call attention to it. There was a recent a campaign where people using the same type as here were putting up posters and spray painting around nearby in North London saying "Visit Tottenham." As in, we wouldn't send you to Tottenham. Why would we send you to Rwanda? You know, that the message. That's the messaging they're going with there.
Sure.
But I will also say I briefly met at one point some San Diego Gooners, and they had their clubs, their supporters group, their replica their T-shirts, which were they were T-shirts but designed like the Arsenal kit. But theirs on the patch and the sleeve said "Visit Tijuana." Which, if you live in San Diego, is well, that's the kind of thing you would do. So,
right. That's funny, like a parody shirt almost.
That's exactly what it is. So that's fun. But yeah, so Kingston and Rwanda, which of course is a natural lead into. I suppose we have to talk about Paris
at some point. Before we head straight there, what are the updates on our injuries? I saw that yesterday, as we record this, when we played Bournemouth, we didn't see Jurriën Timber on the field for one. How is our roster looking right now?
I mean, well, we've been stretched pretty thin, which we knew that. Timber, we're jumping ahead in the story a little bit, but Timber did not play on Saturday against Bournemouth. This is from The Athletic that Arteta did not disclose the exact nature of the problem, but explained Timber was missing from the matchday squad due to a knock picked up in the first leg defeat against PSG, and he is currently considered a doubt for the second leg. And this was a post-game quote after Bournemouth. If he asked if he was confident Timber would be fit, Arteta replied, "Confident? At the moment, no, because he wasn't able to play here, and we play in 4 days." So that's not good.
No.
Well, I say that, and we'll get into this more of the game. Timber had Timber had a very poor performance. I'm shocked that he didn't pick up a card in the game. Let's just say I'm very, very surprised.
Yeah, we will get to that.
So Timber potentially is out, and we'll kind of get into this as well. How much of this is a little bit of gamesmanship on Arteta's part? I don't know. Arteta's typically a straight shooter, but at the same time, anything to make PSG think. I don't know. I suspect it's serious because if he was trying to play coy, he'd be like, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah.
Whereas, it's not like PSG isn't thinking about, I guess, they know how they want to fight, how they would play against Timber if he was starting. They're thinking more about how they deal with Ben White, which at this point, if I were to predict the lineup for Wednesday, I would predict White in at right back. But hopefully at least he can come off the bench, even if he's not quite ready to start. But we'll see. I mean, it's interesting. We talked about this at the beginning of the season, right? How would Timber and White effectively coexist in the right back position? And what's ended up happening is the opposite of the problem last year, which is Timber got hurt early on, so White played the whole season. This year, we have the opposite problem. Timber's had to play the whole season because Ben White has been out for most of it. And just having the both of them has been a luxury that we just simply haven't been afforded this season, which is disappointing, but also just another one of those things we have to sort of deal with.
Yeah. So that's Timber. What else?
From the other side is Ousmane Dembele, who is one of PSG's best players. He scored the goal in the game. The statement issued by the club, by PSG on Friday, was that he had sprained his hamstring, was progressing well, but would require further assessment. Yeah, this is the Athletic talking about Luis Enrique's comments. Dembele's injury was, quote, very minor, but added that should the forward be absent for the second leg against Arsenal, his side would show they are a, quote, real team. So right now, in my head, I expect to see Dembele.
Interesting. Okay.
I mean, partly because you the idea of hope for the best, expect the worst, prepare for the worst. The way they're talking, that suggests, again, very minor. PSG rotated pretty much their entire side this weekend, and lost again in the French league, which isn't a surprise. They played a lot of kids and bench players. I don't know. The commentary there sounds like they're hedging their bets a little bit, as opposed to Arteta's like, I don't know. But I don't know. Again, as we talked about, this is the time of the year when everybody's a little, when everybody's going to be super coy about injuries, partly because they don't know. Again, we'll talk about this with Bournemouth especially, but just the fatigue is kind of setting in. Everyone's playing with a knock. Everyone's hurt. But also, just the gamesmanship angle here. And you just have to, you're kind of keeping your opposition on their toes, tactically speaking.
Yeah, interesting. Now, am I remembering right that toward the beginning of the PSG match, did they say something about Dembele just coming back from injury for that match or something?
I don't remember him coming back from injury, but the story with Dembele is he was actually suspended for when we played PSG back in, what was that, October, November? We played them back early on in the group phase. The league phase, excuse me. Gotta get my terminology right here.
Yeah, gotta stay up to date.
But back when we played them earlier on, Dembele was suspended for that game, and it hurt them. We talked about how relatively how good we looked. Obviously, missing a player of his quality, and him being back was obviously a big difference. We haven't quite set it up yet, but obviously we're talking very heavily about the game against Paris Saint-Germain this week. I mean, Do we want to just dive right into this? Is there anything? I mean, the injury news is so connected to this game. I feel like we've kind of already unofficially started.
Sure. May as well.
Yeah.
So we did end up losing 1-0 to them. So there's that.
Yeah. So, and I think really the story early on, and I'm sure you saw this, was that for about the first 20 minutes, wow, I have not seen us looked outclassed like that since some of the City games. I'm thinking in previous seasons, not even this year, in previous years. It's been a long time since we looked that out of sorts in a game. I mean, I have longer memory on this than you do, but what are your impressions on that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Luckily, it didn't stay that way. Like we found our footing and then began to relentlessly hammer away by the end of the first half. We'd had a bunch of chances, and that continued some in the second half. I feel like we maybe let up off the gas a little bit more than I would have liked to see, but we finished the first half pretty strong, where I was fairly confident that we'd be able to level at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right. And you sort of, the conversation around the game, and so full disclosure, I didn't watch live because I watched like the end of the first half. I was able to see live, but the game essentially feels like the discussion is generally the game is in about three phases, which, having watched the replay, I think is about right. You have the first about 20 minutes where PSG bossed the game. They were flying around us. They were a fast, athletic team. They are a little smaller. They can be pushed around with some physical play, but you can't hit what you can't catch. To use some phrasing from a more physical sport like hockey. After that, Arsenal grew into the game. They settled in a little bit and definitely generated some better opportunities. And that carried through the end of the half into the second half. And then at about the comments people made, and I think it's about right, I want to say about 70 minutes, it felt like the game settled in a bit. And from Arsenal's perspective, I do wonder how much of that was not letting off the gas so much, but sort of saying to yourself, 1-0 at halftime is better than being butchered on the counter and going down 2-0 heading on the road. Because 2-0 heading on the road would be a big problem. 1-0, given the way we played a lot of it, I feel a little better about all of this, but I still don't feel particularly good about all of this. I don't know. How does that comport with what you saw?
Yeah, so basically, first 20 minutes, last 20 minutes were theirs. The middle part was ours. That sounds about right to me. You know, like I explicitly noted in my notes that I took at halftime that it was around the 20-minute mark when we started to find our footing. Like that was definitely... That part I definitely agree with. As far as when things started going back in their favor, my notes kind of dropped off a lot in the second half. There wasn't too much for me to talk about. So, yeah, I can't argue with that.
Right, and the big thing, I think there's a couple of things going on that we talked a little bit about in the build up to the game, but they're worth sort of pointing out again. I mean, some of it is personnel based. Obviously, for us, Thomas Partey was a big miss in the center of midfield. I think he still plays a very important role in the way we play, and so not having him was a problem. Mm-hmm. And we were critical about him for the second yellow against Real, but and this is why. Now, on the plus side, he'll be back for the second leg, and I think he'll be a big addition for us, especially as we've seen. He tends to play really well in bigger games against bigger opposition. We've seen good performances from him against City and Real and some of those other big games and big opponents.
Right, and not just what he brings to a table necessarily, but how everybody else has to shift what they usually do to accommodate taking up the slack for what he does. Like they're not allowed to do their thing the same way either. So there's definitely a ripple effect. So hopefully that does make a big difference.
Yeah, and it did put us into a position where we've seen Marino drop back in the midfield. And I don't think Trossard had a poor day in the center of the pitch or up at the center forward. We've seen him definitely disappear in some of those games. Especially maybe against a bigger opposition, but in the defense. But I don't think. I think Trossard is better suited as the super sub, and having Marino there, we've really sort of developed our offense around the kind of player Marino is. This is the center forward, and so having him drop back into the midfield was hurtful. I think the other thing that hurt us too is the personnel. We talked about Dembele. The other player we need to talk about as well is hold on, wait for it. Kavica Kvaratskhelia. I think it was close. I think I was close. Whatever his name is, he's friggin' fast. He was a problem, major problem throughout. And he was a player they picked up from Napoli. He was a key player for Napoli when they won Serie A a couple of years ago now. But he was a key player, a key pickup for them in January. And it's definitely been a very different kind of thing to play than the team we saw back in the league phase. And in particular, early on, those guys gave us a lot of problems. Of course, it was Dembele ultimately who got the goal. And it just really kind of took a lot of, it really felt like it took a lot of wind out of our sails, given the atmosphere and the hype and the build up to the game.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, hopefully, we have more firsthand experience to draw on and how to counter that when we see the reverse fixture this week.
Yeah, I mean, I do think we have some clues already. Arteta made a comment in the postgame, and I was trying to find the quote, and I couldn't exactly find it, but he basically said, about 20 minutes in, I made a tactical shift. I'm not going to tell you what it was, but I made a change, and things settled down. It was basically the gist of his guy. Like, he did say something to the effect of, I'm not going to tell you what I did, but...
Well, yeah.
But yeah, I do think we made some adjustments that were helping us. I do think as well... And I think we saw this a little bit towards the end of the game. I think for PSG, they were prepared to sit back a little bit and defend the 1-0 lead. And they're a very dangerous team on that idea of sitting back. In some ways, a lot like Real Madrid, in that they're willing to cede possession, although they can possess the ball quite well. But they're willing to cede possession, defend well, and then particularly turn and counter very, very quickly. And they are a very fast team, as we've talked about. And so they can create a lot of dangerous counterattacking opportunities. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is something we'll have to guard against in the second leg. They're not going to park the bus. That's just not who they are. Like we talked about in Europe, like you're just not going to see that same kind of 10 men behind the ball play because that's not who these clubs really are. Like we saw at times against Bournemouth, or we've seen a lot in the Premier League. These teams are too talented. They're too forward looking, and they're offensively oriented, that they're not going to do that. And frankly, even if they tried it probably wouldn't work very well. But they are smart. They can defend well. And it is something we're going to have to be conscious of, especially if we can't get an early goal. We get an early goal, get it to 1-1, changes the tie a lot. But we still have to talk about the first leg before we talk about the second leg.
Right. Well, along those lines, there was a couple of interesting non-calls that this official made during the match, or didn't make, I suppose, during the match. So it was fairly early on. Timber, he made a choice in the penalty box that it would be better if he didn't. But yeah, he kind of grabbed. Who was it? I'm trying to remember the player.
It
was him. Okay.
See, I can't even do it a second time.
Kvaratskhelia. Something like that, yeah. Who, by the way, I while we were trying to figure out what his name was, I pulled up his profile, and he's born on the same day as me, and much earlier or later year.
He's from Georgia. Isn't your wife from Georgia?
He's a good old boy. Yeah.
Isn't your wife family from Georgia? And I have some.
She has family who lives there now. Yeah.
Okay. Just we're clear, the other Georgia.
Yeah, right.
I would very much like to see people from our Georgia try to pronounce his name.
That'd be fun.
That would amuse me. That would amuse me a great deal, and not a lot amused me about this game. Let's be honest.
Yeah, that's a different show. But yeah, so he had his arm like completely wrapped around him and pretty much threw him to the ground, and he was not happy about that, and kind of it looks like he gave the ref an earful after that play was over. But the ref didn't call it, and then
So I mean, let's talk about that one real quick.
Yeah.
Based on your comment, the way you're describing it, I think I know how you come down on this one. Is it a penalty for you?
It definitely looks like Timber got away with one. That was a lot of contact, especially in the penalty box. That was a lot.
It is, and I agree. We were very fortunate not to give a penalty. I mean, it's not the heaviest of contacts, but it's one of those. It looks really bad. He gets his arm basically fully around his midsection.
Yeah.
And it's impressive. He dribbled through three guys, and Timber sticks the arm out, gets him. Now, I think the reason the referee doesn't make the call, and they showed the replay, the referee is like right on it, looking right at it.
Oh, sure.
I think the reason is Kvaratskhelia makes a meal of the challenge, as we say. He definitely embellishes the contact and goes down a bit theatrically. But that doesn't mean he wasn't fouled. And I think I can't look at that and say I'm genuinely surprised they didn't give that.
Right. So he basically said, I don't care what he did, then I'm not giving it to you because you can't react that way.
Well, no, I think he's looking and saying, nah, you embellished that. The contact wasn't that bad. But
Okay.
I'm with you. I was surprised that was not actually given as a penalty. I think Timber was very fortunate there.
Mm-hmm. Well, so then later on in the first half, we had a fairly symmetrical situation. It was a different type of challenge, but again, Marino was teeing up a shot, and Joao Neves he does what we see Saliba doing a lot of the time, where he kind of like tries to get in, he gets the ball first, and a guy goes down as a result of the tackle. And even though he got the ball, it seems like in the Premier League, at least, if you make contact with the ball first, it kind of doesn't matter if the offensive player goes down after. That's the impression I came away with after the Bournemouth match, when we had a Saliba tackle that was treated like that in the box.
Yeah, I mean, you'll see this kind of comment made, that he wins the ball, as if that's sort of a mitigating factor. The fact is, the way the rule is written, that is not a mitigating factor, and I'm not happy about. Well, I mean, I guess in the end we can just say it all washes out. I think that one's also a penalty. I think Neves goes right into Marino's leg. He definitely prevents. In addition, he gets his foot on the ball. That's fair. But he also very clearly makes contact, prevents Marino from making his own play on the ball, and that to me is also a penalty. I thought both calls should have been penalties, which I guess cancels out. I suppose if it's like that, but I think to me, I think. Again, flip the circumstances around. If that had been our guy, if that had been, I don't know, Saka dribbling through the box and a PSG defender gets his arm around his waist and gives him a tug and he goes to ground, we'd be screaming for a penalty, and I think rightly so. On the other hand, I've seen the comparison to the Saliba tackles, and I'm not buying that. Saliba is much more cautious about the kind of contact he makes, or generally is. I mean, or he's a lot luckier. And I don't think Joao Neves is. I think he's making a desperation tackle in the box, but I think he clearly gets into Marino, and the fact he wins the ball is. I'm sorry, that's not a mitigating circumstance. Just because you got ball doesn't mean it's not a foul, and I think that was a foul.
Right.
So,
I think to me, where I would draw the distinction between that tackle and the one yesterday at against Bournemouth, Saliba gets the ball first, and anything that happens to the player after, the player makes contact with Saliba. It's like offensive to defender contact rather than defender to offensive contact, right? Like we talk about ball to hand or hand to ball, right? Whereas Joao Neves, in addition to getting the ball, his leg definitely does knock into Marino's trailing leg, and that's what knocks him over when all is said and done, which is a big difference.
I think that's the right way to sort of think about it. I like the phrasing there. It is it's the defender is initiating the contact, as opposed to what we typically see with Saliba. Again, it's hard to say you establish your position when you're sliding on the ground, but he's pushed the ball the way, and then the offensive player comes into him and makes contact, as opposed to what we typically see where the defender striking the offensive player, which is where you see foul calls come about. And I think that's what we saw here. Again, that's what I think we saw here. Obviously, the referee disagreed.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the referee. We mentioned this already. Timber, aside from being lucky not to concede a penalty, was also frankly lucky, certainly not to have a yellow, either for several challenges he made or just from accumulation. I think they said he had 5 fouls in the first half. That's a lot. That's not. Yeah. That's not okay. And a lot of that, and I do think there were points. We sort of talked about this a little bit the other way with Real Madrid, how Real was getting frustrated with us and was lashing out. I saw a little bit of that too from us. I thought we were frustrated, especially early on. I thought we were, and again, some of it's we're a more physical team than PSG is going to be, but I think there were a few cases we committed some frustration fouls rather than tactical, tactical fouls. Or, definitely just breaking up play fouls that we're just a stronger team than them. I think some of them were frustration, which is a little nervy to see. it can only read so much into body language, and we'll talk about this a lot more in Bournemouth, I'm sure. But I'm a little nervous about reading too much into the body language of this all. But I didn't love it. I didn't love it, even as I thought we were shifting and taking, we were coming more into the game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then, as we cross into the second half, in particular, we had some strong chances. More than a couple of which were foiled by their keeper, Donnarumma. He had quite a game.
Mm-hmm. He's very good. The Italian number one, which it's not really a surprise. Italy produces a good keeper. Big shocker there. But a big lad. He's a tall guy, and really, to his credit, some of the plays he was able to make involved him getting down to the ground, which, as we talked about before, right, is much harder for a taller keeper. And made some really good plays going down. I thought there was a play where Martinelli was in 1-on-1, and just a really good save. I can't really say much more than that. It was just a really good save from Donnarumma. A couple other times where he's able to get a hand to a ball that we wouldn't want, and it hurt. And sort of like Courtois in the first leg, especially against Real, we needed a moment of magic, and we got one from Declan Rice. We almost got one from Rice and Marino there right after the half.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, there's nothing really to debate there, is there? He was offside.
Well, the only thing, there's no debate. What I wasn't clear on when all was said and done was if it was Marino who was offside or if it was another player who was offside that caused the goal to be called back. They showed the cutaway from like the snapshot from the camera into the computer generated image illustrating the offside. That happened so fast, and there were so many guys there who that could have been, and they never really said, I don't think, which player they were focusing on. But that's something I'm surprised that hasn't happened sooner. Like the way that they do their, especially their free kicks, they do this more with the free kicks than with the corner kicks. But the way that they line up offside and then they all like go forward and then back onside.
Yeah,
it always looks like they're flirting with being offside very, very closely. So it was kind of inevitable this would happen at some point, I guess. But.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's a lot is made of our set piece routines. Fine, whatever. But that's kind of what you're always trying to do on those set pieces is be in that position where you're moving towards the ball and towards the goal, even with the defender at the right moment, so that you're past him by the time the ball gets to you. PSG was setting up a little bit deeper. Yeah, they're setting up very deep on that. So for us, and in some ways that helps Donnarumma because of the ball that floats in, he's able to come out maybe and come and get it, as opposed to if they're set up a little higher in the box, that might be a little more difficult for him. I think in terms of who they're focusing on, going back to sort of the intricacies of the offside rule, intricacies as it were. I mean, the ball goes to Marino, he makes contact with it. If he's onside, it's almost certainly a good goal. Now, there's an argument, and we've talked about this too, right? That a player could be in an offside position. One of the other players who doesn't touch the ball could be in an offside position and thus be considered as interfering with the play and potentially be ruled offside as well. Which is a call you would only ever see on a goal. Like, we wouldn't call that a goal, or maybe potentially a corner, or something that's set up for a corner. You wouldn't call that necessarily, short of actual contact, unless a foul against the keeper or another defender. That might be something they were looking for, but I guess I wasn't. See, the problem is this is one I missed live, and therefore I knew what had happened. And so when I watched it, I went in kind of always knowing that they were looking at Marino. And when they ultimately show the animation, which I had seen screenshots of already, but having watched, he's offside. And that's what we want, right? The say what you will about the offside cameras and the difficulties of getting the line, and particularly getting the, players out of the way and all that. That's the call. It's exactly what it was. They're sure what it looks like. It looks clear to me. Okay, play on.
Yeah. Yeah, so that was clearly our most dangerous moment with the ball actually going in. Even though it got called back, we had another offside attempt by Martinelli that he almost got. It was a nice. I think Saka had passed to him. He kind of crossed in front and tried sliding in to get the ball in, just didn't quite make it. But he was offside, and it wouldn't have counted anyway. Trossard had a nice shot that Donnarumma got a fingertip to and just kind of deflected it just barely wide. There's a lot that we did well here, but it does leave me still optimistic for the second leg.
Yeah, I mean, I again, we grew into the game a little bit. We were both. On the one hand, we were a little unlucky with sort of how poorly we played at the start of the game compared to how well they were playing. And I mean, I think there was always going to be a bounce back from there. We're too good. And PSG can't play at that speed for 90 minutes. It's just way, I mean, they came at us. They had another gear. You just can't go that hard for that long. And so as the game slowed down a little bit, that was largely to our benefit, minus the fact we were down a goal, which allowed them to play a little bit more defensive or be comfortable playing a little more defensive. And they did create some opportunities. I think, was it Barcola who, I mean, late in the game cracked one off the crossbar. Although I think he was offside. I think if he had scored, they'd have brought that one back.
I think they mentioned that, yeah.
But we see being able to create some of those opportunities. And you see some of the things that were to our benefit in the when we played them back in the league phase, that we are a technical side, we're a talented side, we can be a very physical side, which for PSG is, they're not small, but I think they're smaller than us, and so that we can get into some cases and maybe bully them in a few physical instances. But overall, the problem is we fell down by one. And so now we are a bit chasing the game, which, that being said, it does make Wednesday really quite simple, doesn't it? You have to win.
Right.
You have to win. There's no other, anything else, and the season's over.
All sort of. We could... Oh, yeah. No, never mind.
It's all over except the bookkeeping.
Yeah, no, I guess I was thinking about a situation that would end in penalties, but yeah, we're down. We do have to win. We have to win by at least one. So yeah.
Right. So we either win by a goal in regulation and then win in extra time, win by more than a goal in regulation, and therefore win in regular time, or we win in regulation, are still even across the tie in extra time, and then it goes to penalties.
Right.
So those are kind of the options in front of us. And at 1-0, I mean, really one goal changes things. Again, it's kind of this is kind of one of those that even if we were in it's interesting, the advantage would actually go to us in the day of the away goals. I know it seems weird to say, well, they have an away goal, yes, but we have to score, period. So if we score and then they score and then we score again and it's 2-2, well, we would have gone through on away goals. Now, obviously, that's not happening. We have to win the tie out. But either of us has to win the tie outright. But, in a sense, it does help them a little bit. But it does help. We're not 1-0 is not an insurmountable setting, especially when you remember that we're +9 on goal difference in knockout stage games in the Champions League this year. We've actually been worse at home. We drew PSV at home. I mean, granted, that game was over. But we drew them at home and had our nervy game with Madrid. Whereas I thought we were very good at Real, and then of course we did things in Eindhoven. Yeah, so one kind of funny observation / question coming out of this, and I don't know why I didn't notice this the last time we played PSG. Presumably this applied to whatever kit they were wearing at that time also, but I noticed the equipment manufacturer had the Air Jordan logo, which was weird to me for a couple reasons. I mean, first of all, clearly Michael Jordan is a basketball player and a little bit of a baseball player, never, as far as I know, a soccer player. But okay, fine. What's also weird, though, is that Air Jordan is a sub-brand of Nike's, and Nike makes jerseys. I have one. It's what's going on with that? Have you seen that with other teams? What's going on there? Yeah, so that's the thing. Nike sort of spun off the Jordan brand, and I think it's called Jordan, but the Jordan brand, and used it on jerseys. Usually, there's a certain like high profile attachment to them. You see it a lot in college. University of North Carolina wears Jordan brand uniforms as opposed to Nike brand. I mean, in terms of like the specs, it's basically the same thing.
Well, right.
But yeah, of course, North Carolina does.
Well, yeah, that was Jordan's school. Yeah,
yeah, but I mean, I think Michigan, I think University of Michigan as well. There's some of the big, I think Oklahoma, like some of the bigger collegiate brands, and so they're starting to do that. And there's a sense of it's Nike, but it's like it's like the high end Nike, I guess. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I think that's they're moving it a little bit into soccer. I mean, part of the reason we don't see it as much is I'm trying to remember. I know there's some Nike teams in the Premier League, but I mean,
most of the A-list teams aren't Nike.
Chelsea and Spurs, those are fairly big brands. Liverpool's about to go to Adidas, so Nike's not going to give them anything good.
And I feel like City was Puma.
City's Puma, and United is Adidas, like us. So in terms of the biggest ones, you don't see it as much in the Premier League, but you'll see it in some of the other European ones.
All right. One other funny thing that I noticed was when they showed Kai Havertz in the stands during the PSG match, he was wearing a Yankees hat. That's just kind of funny to me as an American watching the Premier League, seeing a German player in England wearing an American baseball team hat. That was just kind of funny.
Well, I mean, it kind of goes to the notion of branding, right? I mean, the Yankees, that NY, that brand is globally recognized. Now, I mean, we say that the brand is globally recognized. I mean, how many of those people does it just say New York as opposed to like baseball, right?
I think in some non-English speaking countries, maybe not even New York, maybe just like an abstract line pattern that they associate with that brand. Yeah. Well,
no, I think the connection is with New York City.
Right.
And New York City, of course, carries its own particular cachet. And I think the Yankees version of the NY is, I mean, I think it's a little more, it's going to sound weird to say legible than what the Mets wear, for example, which is also an interlocking NY, but I think the Yankees add into the cachet of being the Yankees, right? And all that goes with that. I think that there's a recognizableness to that symbol. And so but I don't know. I mean, Kai Havertz is an athlete, and athletes know each other. I mean, a lot of American athletes, basketball, football, baseball. I mean, these guys know soccer too. It wouldn't surprise me if some of them know baseball a little bit.
Before we leave Kai Havertz as a subtopic, we had said when he first got injured that he was going to be out for the rest of the season, but I feel like I've seen something in an article or maybe even the commentators talking about he might come back before that.
Yeah, so apparently his rehabilitation's going well, and he can, per Arteta, play, quote, a few games before the end of the season. Now, I let's just be clear. I have seen no indication that includes Wednesday in the Champions League.
Right.
Which leaves you with 3, maybe 4 games. I mean, speaking holistically in the sense of covering all of our bases right here, we have 3 Premier League games left, and then, depending on potentially a game in Munich the following weekend.
Yeah.
But that's potentially 4 games left. As far as we're concerned, the only game, if you're talking about Havertz playing a few games, that's the one you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
That's what that's really about. Now, having said that, so I'm going to take you back a little bit of Arsenal history. We rewind to 2017, late in the Arsene Wenger era, when Arsenal was in the FA Cup final playing Chelsea. And even though he had been out for most, if not all of the season, in the FA Cup final, the Arsene Wenger brought back one Per Mertesacker, the BFG, the big friendly German, a World Cup winner, just by all accounts, an all-around just good dude. Brought him in to play at central defense in a back 3, which is not something we did pretty much at all at that point, and he was spectacular. Now, to be fair, he was a veteran player, had already won the World Cup, had done many, many incredible things in his career. So appearing out of nowhere to play Chelsea in an FA Cup final, it's not like he's not ready for that. That's the kind of thing he was a veteran, guy locked in, showing up at a key moment going, yeah, I can do this. And he was fantastic. Arsenal beat Chelsea. We won the cup. Yay. And so I tell you this story only to say that I really don't think it's a good idea if Kai Havertz's only game for us since he tore his hamstring in Dubai is a potential season-ending game in Munich, which I think is where the idea of a few games comes from. If that were to happen, I wouldn't be surprised if you would see him coming off the bench, especially ideally at that point against Southampton, which would be the last game of the Premier League schedule.
Yeah,
potentially the weekend before against Newcastle, but even that might be a tough one to pull off. I don't know. Again, and how much of this is Arteta just sort of going, I don't know, maybe Kai Havertz plays, and now you're thinking, like, oh, we gotta get ready for Kai Havertz. Oh man,
right?
That's an interesting one. I think how you feel about that depends a lot on how you feel about Kai Havertz. We've been generally positive about him on this show. He is a bit of a confidence player, but when he's confident, he is still the leading scorer on the team, which is kind of annoying given he hasn't played since February. And we should point out, has a Champions League winning goal on his resume. He when Chelsea won, was it 2021, I think? When they won, it was they beat City 2-1, and the second goal was one Kai Havertz. So I don't hate it.
Let me ask you. I mean, is there also any additional advantage to him being German and the final being played in Munich? Like,
no.
Could that be any factor now?
No. I mean, he wants to come back and play because he wants to come back and play. Arsenal wants him to come back and play because he's our leading scorer and he's the guy we want the center of the front of the line, and allow Marino to drop back in midfield and keep keep Trossard as a bench player, or potentially. And this is where it gets interesting, thinking tactically. On the one hand, does Havertz become another version of a super sub, a guy you can bring on who can do something late in the game? The danger there is you may be holding him in reserve to preserve his injury, but that's actually really dangerous because if he comes on and does re-hurt himself, well, now you've wasted a sub, and that's something you want to be very careful of. If there is no game in Munich, is this a Timber situation where he pops in on the last day? I kind of wonder with Timbers how much of that was we want Timber to play with us this year, and how much of that was like we saw Saka was out, and it's like, because that's a hell of a game. That was a heck of a game to throw somebody into. We needed to beat Everton, and we were very much alive for the title. That's a heck of a place to throw Timber into, and he did fine. We got the game, we got the win. Obviously, didn't in the end City won, so it didn't matter, but. That's a risk you take, but sometimes I think I think in the case of Timber, Arteta's hand was forced a little bit by some injuries late on. So again, a lot to think about. We've got assuming there's a Munich game. There's two very tough Premier League games even before we get to Southampton. So I think there's a lot to think about in terms of squad and how guys are feeling coming out of a second PSG leg. Excuse me. So it's a wild card. It's just another card maybe in the deck, and just gives us something to think about. But the good kind of problem. What if I had too many good players to choose from?
Right. The opposite problem from what we've definitely had this season. So enough PSG, at least for now. We will certainly be talking about them a lot next week's episode, no matter what happens. Let's shift to the Bournemouth match of this weekend. Could you have possibly guessed at the outset of the season, when we talked about what we thought might happen this season, that we would lose low single-digit matches, and at a certain point that we would have only lost 4, drawn 13, that 2 of those losses would both be to Bournemouth.
Yeah, for Bournemouth to do the double against us and the 14 draws. I mean,
it's 14 now. That's right.
Yeah, in a sense, there's not a lot to say about this game. I mean, it felt like as you're watching this game, it feels like the game we've been talking about for the last 2 months, where we create some early opportunities, we get a goal, maybe a goal. In this case, we got one on a nice play. Nice pass to Odegaard. Odegaard with a great ball into space. Rice finds it. Gets around the keeper and scores. And then how many times did you say to yourself, man, if we just get that one more, we kill this game off, and we just didn't get it.
Yep. We never do the last few months. Yeah.
And it opened us up. And we haven't talked about this as much because, so much of the focus is on us at set pieces. And we talk about how good we are at set pieces. Just so we're clear, we're good offensively at set pieces. We have struggled defensively at set pieces, and we got burned on that twice yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah, the one time you could definitely put on us. The second time, there was a little bit of a situation there, wasn't there?
Yeah, we can talk about that one. I mean, let's start with the first goal. I mean, Semenyo, nice player. It's impressive that they have a guy like him they can come off the bench. I think he usually was brought in off the bench in this one. Long throw into the box. Howson gets loose. That's just, again, it's frustrating because it's frustrating because you put yourself in a situation where one play like that can make a big difference. And they had generated some opportunities, but by and large, I thought we were clearly the better team throughout much of the game. But then you leave yourself open where one mistake and it's 1-1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, on the bright side, we now know how to say his name. It is Howson. Mm-hmm. We weren't sure last week when we talked about him as a potential Arsenal acquisition at some point. So now we know.
Yeah, we definitely know. And don't be surprised if you hear his name with somebody else this summer. His is a name that's been floated out. We talked about even Arsenal, maybe. I'll be curious to see how that plays out, with Kivior, Gabriel, and kind of how we're, and obviously I would hope a lot of our resources or efforts going towards a player on the offensive end of the field, a forward, a striker, that kind of thing. But, again, we've got to move. So there are some pieces maybe we have to move around. And so we've talked about Zubimendi. There's no reason we can't offload a Kivior and make some money after a strong finish this season. Now you bring in Howson and, maybe that offsets the spending a little bit. I don't know. Again, I'm just speculating here. Kivior's been great. And, as much as I like the role he's playing and how he's grown into it this week, I also think he may be a guy who says, I really want to play every week. And I don't know if that's going to be the case in a team that has Gabriel and Saliba in their central defense.
Yeah, no, that's true. I mean, so getting back to the goal, though, for a minute. So that you called it a long throw by Semenyo, which is almost like understating it. I mean, to me, a normal long throw would maybe go as far as the edge of the 18-yard box, but this was full-on corner kick distance long throw. I mean, well, how much of Arsenal's inability to defend it was just that's so uncommon to be able to throw it that far?
Well, I think in a lot of ways, it's because I think that's coming from you because it's not a play you'll see very often.
Okay.
So the long throw, like we see there, typically is done only when the throw-in comes very deep in the offensive end. And to be fair, there aren't that many guys in the league who can do it. It's not a sport where people throw the ball very often. So it's it counts as a special skill in this game.
Right.
But Semenyo is one of those guys, and I mean, you see you can sort of, it's like watching a kicker, in American football, the way he lines up. You can tell when he's about to just whale it, and there's a way they approach the long throw, and you can see Bournemouth crowding the box. They're setting up almost like it's a corner, which is essentially what it is. Typically, you don't see that often, because how many times do we see on throw-ins them pick up the ball and just quickly get it back in, or even when we try to set something up? I mean, you maybe could try, and I think we saw this. Was it against PSG? We tried this one where, because you can't be offside on a throw-in. So I think it was Timber cranked it down the field, and it was Lewis Skelly must have cranked down the field because there was Martinelli blazing his way up, and And he was offside, except you can't be on a throw. So,
Right.
generally speaking, you don't see those kinds of throws because that's generally circumstantially, it doesn't make sense. In this case, with a guy like Semenyo who has the arm strength to do it, yeah. And Arsenal, and they were, I don't want to say they were ready for it because they clearly let Howson, the tallest player on the other team, free.
Mm-hmm.
But that's it. It's not like they were thinking, wait a minute, he can't throw that far. They knew that. So it's a frustrating thing to get beat on. But again, set piece defense has been a problem.
Yeah. We can definitely chalk that one up to a lack of set piece defensive skills, at least in that situation. But the second goal, that's much more troubling. So, this was the one where it was a corner kick. So, arguably still a little bit of, lack of defense in a set piece situation. But in this one, it was just a chaos in the box. The ball's bouncing around and Evan Nielsen is like falling, either was falling or was already on the ground. And the ball bounced into, and I'm going to see if I can kind of show, but like, it was like the ball hit mid chest and question mark his arm, right? Like potentially his arm, but the way that it hit his chest and went straight down really strongly looked like it must have hit his arm, or else how could it have gone down at such a sharp angle afterwards? But this seemed like a lack of proof. I don't know what they require for definitive proof. I don't know how you can get more proof in that case on the VAR review, but
yeah, I feel like a lot of this is a little bit of a Rorschach test because I see plenty of people who are talking about Odegaard fouling him on the play, and they're jostling and stuff. To me, that kind of feels like the kind of thing you see on any set piece, on any corner, the kind of jostling and the grabbing there. As I saw it, the ball, to me, looked like it deflects off Odegaard. To me, I saw it as hitting off his elbow and going in. But just think about that here. We're having that conversation. We can't even agree on what it was we saw. There's a word for that, isn't there?
Well, yeah.
And the word's inconclusive, right? And so if that's the case, now again, I saw arm, and we've seen it this year when it hits, even when it's inadvertent. If the arm is the last thing it touches, it's not a goal. Now I say I saw that, but I mean I'm not an unbiased observer of the, I'm an interested party in this, so I don't. That's what I saw, but honestly, if the VAR there says, if it's inconclusive, I don't know. There's really not much that you can do about that. It's frustrating and unfortunate. And look, we can rage about the handball and the non-call and VAR. And the fact is, we shouldn't be in that situation. It shouldn't matter.
Well, right,
why is it? Why do we need the VAR to rescue us again? Right? If this was a one-off and we had been rolling along and weren't staring down the barrel of our 14th draw or worse, that's a different conversation. But we keep having this conversation about these marginal calls that feel to go against us. Why are we in a position where the marginal calls like this continue to make a difference? And that's where we're having a problem. This isn't Arteta out. This isn't we need to rip this to the studs. But I don't want to get hung up on the refereeing as we did at times, especially earlier in this season. We cannot keep putting ourselves in this position. This is a result, and I said this to you pregame, right? This is a result that we have been basically waiting on for the last couple of weeks. We have been baiting ourselves into this into this kind of game. Yeah. And I mean, and look, there's a lot of things that are there. I think the players are sort of mentally fatigued. You can sort of see them dragging at times. I think they know, obviously, with the league being over, that this result doesn't really matter. Although the table's not as set as you would like it to be. And substitutions came very late in the end. Look at the players we put on. It's Raheem Sterling and Alexander Zinchenko. Like that's it. That's what we got.
Yeah.
And Ethan Nwaneri, who I'm convinced is not healthy. We know he suffered a knock. I just think. To me, he should be getting more of a run Arteta doesn't feel comfortable because something is not, I don't want to say quite right with him, but he's not and again, he's 18, he's very young, so we are trying to be careful with him. But to me, there's something else potentially going on there. Again, hopefully not a permanent long-term thing, hopefully just a kind of knock-on from earlier this season, but I feel like a healthier Nwaneri gets more time than we've seen in the last few months.
So, yeah, definitely not the result we were looking for, but kind of like what you were saying. I mean, ultimately, when you have so many draws, all of those draws, we like to think of them as being one goal away from victory, but the flip side of that coin is you're also one goal away from defeat. And so this was kind of inevitable at some point. So the worst thing about it is looking at the table after that was over. Manchester City is 3 points behind us now. So all it takes is, another slip from us and they win, and we're not even in number 2 anymore.
Yeah, kind of. I mean, obviously the most important thing in terms of the league table is making the Champions League, which is finishing in the top 5. Right. And we are currently 7 points clear of 6th place Nottingham Forest. Now, Forest does have a game in hand. They'll play tomorrow, I think. But, I mean, we do have Southampton as our final game. And frankly, if we drop points to Southampton, we deserve to miss the Champions League. But in a general sense, in terms of qualifying for the Champions League, yes, there exists mathematical possibilities that we could drop out. Obviously, City is 3 points behind us. Newcastle and Chelsea are a point behind them. By the way, we should add our goal difference is plus 33. Cities is plus 24.
Okay, so that helps.
I'm not. We're not going to fall. But we're still generally in good place. And if we tie, yes, it would be extremely frustrating and extremely annoying to lose a spot in the table relative to last year. It would be extremely annoying and frustrating to fall behind the worst team City has had in about 10 years. But in the long run, it doesn't really matter. And we can point to all the reasons why there were struggles this season or the problems we had this season. And actually, as I'm looking at the table now, we actually do only have 13 draws. This could have been the 14th, but we turned it into the 4th loss instead. So just a brief clarification on that point. So, I mean, yes, could we fall out of second place? I mean, two of our next 2 league games are Liverpool and Newcastle, who are currently 1st and 4th in the table. And Newcastle in particular has been a real problem for us.
Right. Those are both teams that have, well, I guess Liverpool didn't beat us yet this season. We drew against them, right, when we played them before.
Right, and drew against them
Newcastle's beaten us, though.
Newcastle's beaten us. Liverpool drew against us a game that, frankly, I feel a little perturbed about because our defense was a complete disaster in terms of lineup by the end of the game. We played them well over the years. And let's be honest, the next time we play them, they're going to be drunk. They lost 3-1 to Chelsea today, which people are like, oh my God, what happened? What do you mean what happened? They're drunk. Like, they won the title. Who cares? Their season's over. They're not in any other cups. They're done. So, yeah, it's potentially some difficult games. This could potentially be a very painful week. Let's be honest. If we were to, go out against PSG, go up to Liverpool, and then have to watch them celebrate and then fall again, it could be. This could be a very painful week coming up ahead. You thought this week was bad? Oh, the darkness could be around the corner.
All right. Well, let's wrap up the discussion this week by deciding on our players of the week. Who would you pick?
My pick for player of the week is Declan Rice. I thought he was one of the guys that struggled in the early going against PSG, but then a lot of players struggled in the early going against PSG. Let's be honest. I thought he was able to turn it around. He's been very aggressive, very forward thinking. They're not going to make a change at the captain. I know Odegaard has had a very rough season, and Rice has all sorts of the captain-esque qualities that a lot of fans love. I know Odegaard's the captain of this team, but Rice is playing that way, and you like to see that kind of leadership from a guy like him. And I thought he's been he was a good player for us this week, even ultimately if there were holes in his performance. Because frankly, you can say that about just about everybody we saw. In a week where you lost twice.
Yeah, no, fully agreed. He would be my first choice too. In addition to what you said, what I really noticed him doing in the PSG match too was poking the ball away from them over and over again, helping us regain possession when we had lost it. That was a great thing that he was doing for us. And yeah, and then in the Bournemouth match, he had the most threatening chances of the match. Even though it didn't materialize the way that we would have liked, except for the one. Overall. Yeah, overall commanding performance from him. As a second choice, I would pick Saliba. I know he had a rough week the last week or two. No one in the right mind would have picked him after some of the botched plays that he was a party to. But I feel like he was back in good form this week with a couple key tackles in each of these matches. Some good play all around, and Martinelli is worth a shout. Miles Lewis-Skelly continues to impress each match. But yeah, I would give it for me to Saliba as a second choice.
Yeah, I mean, I think Lewis-Skelly is a really good call as well. It seems weird. We talk about the weaknesses we see all over the field, and somehow this kid, who we didn't even think was a left back, is the left back. So
yeah.
It's a funny old game. It's a funny old game, football.
Yeah. It's actually funny too. Before one thing I wanted to mention to you, you're not able to hear the telecast too much because you watch in the pub, right?
Yeah.
It was funny for me watching this Bournemouth match. Some fan with a particularly boisterous mood and loud voice was positioned right next to a microphone, and I was able to hear some of the chants that I've never been able to really make out the words to before, which was kind of fun for me. So the Declan Rice, we got him half price. Like you may be hearing other people singing those in the pub or something. Like I'm not hearing it during the match, but I did this time, and he had some choice criticisms of what may have been going on the pitch during the match. It was kind of funny.
I was about to say, I wonder how many of those songs you could actually repeat on air. Anyway,
so what's coming up for next week?
Right. So of course, Wednesday away to Paris Saint-Germain, second leg of the Champions League semi-final. We're down 0-1. It'll be on CBS. This is it. This is the season right here. Whether it doesn't end on Wednesday night, but it might end on Wednesday night. So this is it. This is as climactic as it's going to get. That's on Wednesday. On Sunday, we are away again, this time to the champions Liverpool. That game will be on Peacock. It'll probably be a big party at Anfield. Hopefully, regardless of what happens in Paris, if nothing else, we can at least spoil the party. I was going to go with a metaphor, but we'll just spoil the party a little bit. But I don't think they care. I really don't think they care. So, it's Wednesday. It's Paris. This is it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us at Gooner U. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also listen to our show on Apple, Spotify, and some other places. If you're only listening, try watching us on YouTube with a link in the show notes. Your homework for today is to tell a friend about the show. Or tell an acquaintance, or a distant relative. We're not picky. We record the show using Zencaster. If you'd like to try it out, you can support Gooner U by signing up using the link in the description, which also has links to everything we talked about and our social pages. Again, my name is Dove, and you can find me on Twitter at Dove Frankel. With me, as always, is Keith, and you can find him in a pub watching Arsenal matches.
And once again, may the 4th be with you.